the reason why I thought it was so important for us to have you on here, a lot of what the focus of this program has been is been about the nonprofits and how they've had to, change, pivot, and deal with the COVID crisis. But we've been seeing in the media and within discussions within the community that another side effect of the COVID crisis has been that it seems that the domestic violence has almost increased because of the environment, and this is what we're hearing. How has, because you're working so directly close with this, for people who aren't aware of what's going on, how has COVID and the quarantining affected our community and your work?
At the beginning of our shared experience, both locally and internationally, it occurred to those of us who provide support and services to victims and survivors of domestic violence that a stay-at-home directive was going to have dire consequences for people who live with an abusive partner. The challenges we're all facing doesn't turn somebody into an abuser. However, if your partner is a perpetrator of abuse, and abuse is not only physical assaults, but includes other tactics. If your partner is a perpetrator of abuse, being held hostage in your home at the directive of state health and elected leaders has potential deadly consequences. You have no opportunities to go anyplace, have a respite, your partner doesn't go anyplace. You can't make a telephone call because the person is standing nearby. That's why we made immediate adjustments to our capacity for potential clients to reach us. We added a text feature to our helpline and a chat feature to our website so that people could work from home and be possibly chatting with us and getting some information. So we were very, very mindful at the outset that we had to communicate to our community that the Domestic Violence Action Center was open for business. We were available to help people who needed help, and we added ways for them to receive help. We also wanted the community to know that it was very important. If you know somebody who you had concerns about ever, or detected red flags or warning signs, we encourage people to reach out to them. Usually people think, well, this is none of my business. I shouldn't get involved. I don't want to ruin my friendship. Maybe I'm inventing this or exaggerating this. We say you don't want to have any regrets. So if you have ever had a concern about a family member or a coworker or a neighbor, reach out to them and let them know that you're available for help if they need it. So we did a few things very early on to make sure that we were being as responsive as we could, because we were afraid that domestic violence would increase. We heard our community leaders and panels of business members and foundation leaders and elected leaders talking about health and homelessness and hunger, but there wasn't much conversation or discussion about domestic violence. And domestic violence, or the escalation of domestic violence, is a very clear and direct consequence of the coronavirus.
When you were talking about encouraging friends and family who may suspect something's going on to reach out and help, and I think there's so many instances where people do feel that fear or concern that they're overstepping, or
Yeah.
what can if I offer help, like when they say yes, well then what do I do?
Right.
What are some of the more effective ways people that you could encourage people in the community to approach that type of discussion? And then what would they be able to do to help, as far as, like, let's say they wanted to push them forward in your direction? What would they be able to tell the person, that their loved one, that this is what the benefit of reaching out to you for help would help with the situation?
Those are real good questions. It's a very, very delicate conversation to have with somebody. Most people avoid it because it is so delicate, and they don't know how to begin the conversation. And clearly, they don't know what to do if they get an affirmative response that, yes, I am
Yeah.
in danger, or yes, I am afraid. Yes, can you help me? Um, what we want people to understand is that they don't have to be an expert. They can leave that to us. We just want them to pave the way for someone to know that we are here. They can make an anonymous, confidential telephone call, or send us a chat or a text message, and we will respond. Um, Mostly, we want people to know that there are options, and there is the need for the development of what we call a safety plan. When you are living with somebody who has hurt you before, the likelihood they're going to hurt you again is very real. And when that occurs, it's real hard to have a plan, because when you're in crisis, you can't think carefully, you can't think thoughtfully. But if you think in advance, you can just execute your plan at the time that you need it. So we help people think about a safety plan. And for example, like, stay out of the kitchen where there are potentially weapons like knives. Stay out of a place where you could be trapped into a corner. Simple things that you wouldn't necessarily have in your mind, but would be easy to put into effect should you be in danger. Every person's situation is different, so I don't want people to think that there is such a thing as a safety plan that works for everyone. We want to help somebody develop a safety plan that's going to be good for them. So that's one thing. Everybody could benefit from having a safety plan. Everybody doesn't have to be an expert. People can call us and ask for information without telling us who they are or where they are, and we'll provide them some support and some guidance and some information, referrals about what other resources might be available for them. We want people to know that their safety is our priority. And it's very easy, and particularly when circumstances are as they are now, to minimize the seriousness of a situation. Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, he had a bad day at work, or we're running out of food. It's the end of the month, that we can get through this. If you're concerned about somebody, no matter what their circumstances are, maybe you could offer to agree on a sign, a signal, an emoji, that if they needed help, you could send the police, or you could drive by and pick them up. Again, this is not the kind of thing that you would necessarily think of in advance, but if you said to me, Nanci, I think I'm at risk. I think I'm in danger, and these are my words, not their words. We would say, if you call me and you say the word blue, I'm going to send the police. If you send me a smiley emoji, I'm going to come and drive by and assume that you're going to be standing outside. I'll pick you up. These are things that have to be agreed to in advance. So these are
Right.
just some tips for a person to think about in terms of reaching out to somebody that they know or love or are concerned about.
I gotta assume that there's gonna be so many different situations, as you mentioned, but I feel like if I was in that position, I would come up with all kinds of reasons not to seek help. In as far as, like, well, this sounds like it makes sense for most people, but my situation is different, or they may not understand culturally, things like of that nature. How do you address making sure that you can help each victim who reaches out to you know that they're understood, and that it's not just like how you mentioned, like it's not a cookie cutter of like this is what you got to do and you're fine. How do you address that?
Well, we listen very carefully to what the person's experience has been, what the history of the relationship uh, is characterized by, what the factors are that point to lethality and levels of lethality, and based on our expertise, make some suggestions that the person, when they are ready, will employ. Everybody makes decisions at a different pace. What I would do might be something completely different than what you would do. And I might do it, might take me longer to do it than it would take you to do it. So we have to allow everybody to make their own decisions at their own pace in their own way. And in particular, the Domestic Violence Action Center has developed programs that are rooted in a person's racial and ethnic community. So we have advocates on staff who work specifically in the Kofa community, in the Korean community. We have a relationship with the Japanese consulate, and so we have a Japanese advocate who works with Japanese nationals, LGBTQ, a program serving Native Hawaiian families, Filipina. So we recognize that it's not the same challenge, the same community norms, the same expectations for each one of our communities. We have to recognize that communities hide or respond or recognize domestic violence quite differently.
That's awesome, because I think that especially being here in Hawaii with so many different communities and ethnicities, that it's such an intricate and complex situation. And the thing that I loved hearing is that you said you listen, which I think for many victims, that's the thing that they don't have, is someone to listen.
Right.
And that's so powerful for them.
Right. I mean, it is almost an instinct to keep domestic violence a secret. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment about being a victim of domestic violence. The community holds still a lot of judgments about victims, and there's a lot of victim blaming. So, for good reason, somebody doesn't voluntarily disclose information about what's going on behind closed doors. And our job not only is invested and committed to serving victims when they need us, but our job is also to help educate the community about the complexity and the gravity and the prevalence of domestic violence, so that they can help us. This job is way bigger than we are at the Domestic Violence Action Center. And there's a role for every sector to play. So if you're a healthcare practitioner, or you're a law enforcement officer, or you're a clergy person, or you're a teacher, or you're a social worker, or you're a business owner, there's something you can do for the people who are in your path to help them feel supported. There are a lot of threats from abusers, which is another reason why people keep the problem a secret. They don't know if their abuser is going to make good on those threats. There's also a lot of promises. I'll never do this again. And all of us who are in relationships where we've made a commitment want to believe those promises and hold on to the hope that the situation is going to get better and that we can work this out together and get on the other side of the problem we're experiencing now.
I'm so glad that you explained some of those reasons, because I think for many people in the public who have not been exposed to or experienced that, and of course every every situation is different, but the common thing I hear is, well, if that happened to me, I would have no problem calling the police. And it's not it. So they think because of their fear of reporting or saying anything, something must be, it's worth hiding, or
Right,
that it's not necessarily the facts are as basic as it seems.
right. I mean, I think there are a lot of assumptions that the community as a whole makes about families where there is the problem of domestic violence. The myths and misconceptions about domestic violence are still uh, thriving. That somehow this only happens to certain kinds of families in certain kinds of neighborhoods with drinking problems, or they grew up as a victim of domestic violence. Our experience really challenges those myths and misconceptions. Domestic violence does not discriminate, crosses all socioeconomic classes, um, professions, religions, educational levels, ethnicities, racial communities. Um, we have to recognize that domestic violence is hidden, it's embarrassing, it is minimized, it is judged. And until we shine the light on it, we as a community won't be developing a response that's effective or appropriate.
So what is the Domestic Violence Action Center doing to bring more awareness to the community, to change those misconceptions right now here in Hawaii?
Mm-hmm. Well, I earlier mentioned that we have kind of a dual commitment to our community. One is to provide immediate help to those people who reach out who need it. The other is a very deliberate and extensive public awareness commitment. So we distribute materials, we display materials. We're putting currently posters in restrooms, the businesses, restaurants, public buildings, so that if I go into the restroom, I can have 5 minutes by myself where I see the information, and we have a tear off piece of information that you can take with you, and it has our contact information on it. We are trying to be very mindful about our social media engagements. We use Instagram and Facebook very actively. We're getting ready to ramp up our Twitter presence. Uh, we do not decline any invitations to participate in broadcast and print medium. We partner and collaborate with a lot of community organizations that are situated. Some are situated as we are. We work with Child and Family Service, for example, and Parents and Children Together. Um, we work with the Hawaii Commission on the Status of Women, the Hawaii State Judiciary, Child Welfare Services. We try to help everybody gain a deeper understanding of the complexity of the problem of domestic violence.
I think that's great that you're working so hard on your social media presence, because I think so much information could be shared through that way. And for a lot of people in the community who may not be exposed to a lot of this information, it's a natural and easy way to share that with them. And so I think it would be great that people watching this and listening to this could just go to your Instagram or your Facebook and just see
Our
the kind
website.
of things that you're putting out there, that will help get people a better understanding of what the situation is out there.
Yeah. I mean, we're quite worried about the near future. Uh, After the stay-at-home directive was lifted, and there's a little bit more mobility in the community, we noticed that visits to our website have been increasing very steadily. We're seeing between 50 and 70 visits to our website every day, which of course makes us think that people are beginning to think about what are their options? Are there any options that work for them? Uh, how can they get free and get safe from the abuse that they've been living with? Of course, along with that comes the reality that even though we're here to provide navigation as people think through their path forward, there are many, many obstacles to getting free and safe. If you've lost your job, your resources are shrunk, and your options, therefore, are reduced. So we're trying to craft, like I said, the blueprint that works for an individual. So while people are trying to figure out what to do, I can't live like this anymore. We have to connect them up with what realistic resources are there in our community to help them live. Everybody has a right to live safe in their home. But there are many, many obstacles: affordable housing, affordable childcare, um, safety, restraining orders, law enforcement. All those things come into play when a person is trying to think about an escape plan.
And those are all resources and help that you are helping these families and individuals with, right?
Yes, they are.
See, I think that's what's so overwhelming, just even as a person from the outside looking in. If I just were to imagine being in a situation like that, the thoughts of not just the action that's happening to me, but how does it affect, my family, my children, or job security, where will I live, like all of those things, like who do I talk to, who can I trust, to have a resource like yourselves that have that knowledge and that experience, and then also again tying that in with being able to listen, to hear that each person who walks through or calls, that you fully understand
Right.
what their unique situation is and concerns are, and how to address those. That's got to be so helpful and such a relief to know that there is that support.
Mhm. Well, that's clearly the feedback that we get from the clients and the survivors that we have helped, that they never felt so understood until they met somebody from the Domestic Violence Action Center. And that makes it's very uplifting for us to be meeting people where they're at and giving them what they need at a time when they're really immobilized. We have a program which is located on site at court, so that if you are getting a temporary restraining order or seeking the court's assistance in getting a restraining order, we have a program with staff on site at court that helps you understand what is a restraining order, what can you expect if you get a restraining order, what is a safety plan you might put into effect once you get your restraining order, what to expect when you get into the courtroom and you have to face your abuser, what are the things you should think about asking for when you are in the courtroom with the opportunity to ask the court for some assistance. So our staff meets with every single person who's petitioning the family court to answer all their questions and provide the crisis support and the safety planning that they need. And the feedback that we get from those survivors is really rich.
That's so amazing. Just hearing you list those things wouldn't have even crossed my mind. But as you say it, if I didn't have those resources,
Yeah.
I'd be terrified. It just sounds so overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a different universe, really. The language is different, the procedures are unfamiliar, everything is unfamiliar. And so how do you navigate yourself through such unfamiliar territory? Well, it's very
Yeah.
good to have a guide, like something.
Hearing you talk about this, I feel so excited and appreciative that you're doing the work that you're doing to help these individuals in our community. But then at the same time, I worry, because I'm like, man, this sounds like so much. It's so heavy, and you're just hearing one story would affect me, but you're hearing them daily, on the hour almost, probably, I'm assuming. How how are you able to do the work that you're doing, um, and not just completely? I mean, it just sounds so overwhelming to me.
Yeah. Well, it's incredibly gratifying to help somebody and to make the kind of difference that we make in a person's life. It's really, really fulfilling. And knowing that we have been able to lift somebody up is very satisfying. I'm often asked the question, how do you do this? You've been doing this for
Yeah.
so long. Well, it's really that helping people one by one and changing their lives to the degree that we are able to is it's a gift, really, to have the opportunity to do it. Um, it's frustrating because the system doesn't really work as well as we'd like it to work. And we are trying to always advocate for the system to be more responsive and more effective. But when people know that we are here to stand beside them and are standing beside them, I mean, it's just so fulfilling. It's so fulfilling. I know that sounds corny, but it is. The number of people that we are able to support while they are changing their lives, it's a privilege.
Well, getting to take a look back at all that has happened, it's I'm sure that's the success and the change that you've been able to implement is what motivates a lot of motivation for you to continue to do this. But do you recall a moment or one of the earlier moments where when you first started this journey that made you go, okay, this is why I need to do this? Like what was it that made you feel like I gotta stay committed to this mission and this cause and to commit your life essentially to this?
Yeah. I love that question. I feel like I'm a messenger. I have not been a victim of anything myself: child abuse, sexual assault, partner abuse. I'm one of the few lucky women I know who has not been a victim of anything. And I have experienced multiple um, consistent opportunities to be of service in these ways to the community. And I take that as my sign that I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing what I was meant to do, and that this is my purpose. And the fulfillment I get from realizing my purpose uh, keeps me going, um, keeps uh, keeps the thrill alive, if you will, in spite of the overwhelming challenges and barriers and setbacks. Um, I don't see how we could abandon it. Really, I
Yeah.
don't see how we could abandon it. We cannot walk away or pretend we don't know what we know at this point. So we have to forge ahead and make new friends and continue to inspire other people to join us on the journey.
Speaking to that, I think that's what would be so helpful for your organization is to have more help and support. What are some of the things that you as an organization are having difficulty with now, whether it's because of COVID or just in general, that you could use some help with, and what maybe the community that you haven't gotten that connection or that help from yet? How can we help most in things that are challenging for you right now?
Well, that's a good question too. I think one of the things that our community can do is, again, if you know someone that you have concerns about, reach out to them. That's an enormous help to them and to us, because ultimately it creates a connection between them and us. And that's very, very important. We are here to help and we are here to serve. And if people need us, we want them to find us. We also really feel strongly that there's a role, I said this earlier, there's a role for every sector, and everybody has to step up and see what is it they can do to help the Domestic Violence Action Center address the problem of domestic violence. Everybody has to reflect carefully and thoughtfully about what they can do to make their work environment, their congregation, their healthcare system, their law enforcement system, their foundation, their school, more attuned to the presence and the prevalence of domestic violence. We are not exaggerating when we say domestic violence is happening in every community on this island and across the state and globally. Very early on in the coronavirus pandemic, the UN Secretary General pointed to almost immediately an increase in the incidence of domestic violence. So if every business, every leader, every foundation, every funder, every community organization, every civic group, every trade association could take a look at themselves and say, is there one thing that we can do in our organization to join the Domestic Violence Action Center in addressing the problem of domestic violence? What is it? The holidays are going to be on the horizon. We have a lot of families that are resource poor. We want to make the holidays a happy time. I know that sounds corny, but there's a little joy to be had, even in the face of adversity, despair, and fear. So if you want to adopt a family, we can connect you up with a family that you could give a turkey to, or give some gifts to, or give a gift card to, or a gift certificate to, or a meal, or there's many, many ways that we can be good neighbors and be good neighbors to those people who are suffering the terror and the torment of domestic violence.
And the best way probably to connect with your organization, with how we as businesses or individuals or community members can help, because those are a lot of great ways to help. And aside from also, I'm assuming, monetary donations.
Money's always good.
Yeah, right. Because it's not free to do all this, right? Yeah. Would it be to go and contact you or reach out to your website?
People are welcome to contact me directly. I'm not running out of ideas just yet. So if they would like for me to help them think through what they might be able to do to help us, I'm delighted to do that.
I was even just thinking, as you're mentioning business owners and such, I thought, wouldn't it be great if the businesses, connected their employees with just awareness and education about your organization and what you do?
Definitely.
Because that's probably a place where a victim is probably at best situated to seek help, right? Because they're away from home, they're at the office and whatnot.
That's right. If you're a business manager, or business owner, or business leader, call us. We'll give you posters. You can put them in your your restrooms. That's one small act that brings your workforce closer to help. It's a very small thing. There are many, many things that they could do. If you're a business, another thing that we developed some years ago was a program called DV Action Ready to help businesses position themselves to train their supervisors and their HR managers to recognize the signs of domestic violence and to be supportive rather than punitive. Sometimes we think, well, she's always late. That's a problem with her performance. But he might be sabotaging her while she's getting ready to go to work. And she escapes from home and she finally gets to work, even though it's a little late. But if you know how to have a conversation with somebody after you see a pattern, you might be able to be of some help rather than you know, more disciplinary. But there's a bunch of different tools and techniques that we can help people think through for their workforce, what would work for them.
I love that. I think that so much healing and growth can happen through understanding
Yeah.
and I love that you say rather than being punitive. I think just in general in life,
Yeah.
if we come to more of a desire to understand versus judgment.
Yeah.
So I think that this is really great. I'm excited with the creativity that you as an organization have had and continue to have with how to help our communities as the environment and things change. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes about because it's definitely, it feels like as depressing and as troubling as it seems that what's going on, it's also encouraging to see that you have people like yourselves and organizations like yourselves that care so much that aren't going to let this overcome us and go unsupported. So thank you so much.
I mean, we have an incomparable team at the Domestic Violence Action Center. There are 50 staff who do nothing but respond to the needs of our island families and survivors. So our services are unduplicated and our staff is incomparable. So yeah, we feel very, very good about the ways in which we're helping and our intention to continue helping.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know you got a lot of work to do, so I'm going to let you get going back to the great job that you're doing. And we'll go ahead and put all of your contact information, social media in the description. But thank you so much. And I really look forward to talking with you again soon.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.